On the rundown, I put that we needed to react to trade deadline news at 4:30 today. There is no news to react to. I think that in and of itself is a worthwhile discussion.
Yeah.
But the point of this segment was supposed to have been, let's talk about the couple of small moves that they made, but there were no small moves. So the question is why? And that's the question I want to pose for you guys on the phones right now. At 800-636-1067, 800-636-1067. Why did they do nothing? How hard do you think Adam Peters worked the phones to make a trade? How badly do you think he wanted to sell? I don't mean be a full-on seller like this is the Major League Baseball trade deadline. He's not going to go all New York Jets on you and deal Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner like the Jets did today to get not one or two, but 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick and a couple of young players back, one on both sides of the ball. But do you think he was working the phones, making calls, trying to sell, or not? And do you think the reason they didn't make any trade was that they weren't that interested in doing so, or that they just didn't have the ammunition? Because I think it was B. My guess is if Peters had his druthers and had the opportunity to make moves, he would have done it. If Peters could have made trades today and gotten some picks and some value back, he probably would have pulled it off.
I just can't believe that no deals were available. I guess that's where I'm starting from. So in general, I would assume that a smart, competent person and a smart, competent front office, which I happen to still think this one is, would have been doing what you just said. The fact that nothing came to fruition, you couldn't get a sixth for Andrew Wilder, you couldn't get a pick swap for a lineman that's not going to play for you this year, tells me they weren't really that interested. And maybe I'm too cynical, maybe I'm too skeptical, but the combination of you don't have a lot of desirable assets, I think that's unequivocal. I think that's obvious, right? I think we start there. Again, that's not as if you've got a field of players that everyone wants to give you multiple first-rounders for.
If we just need to agree to some early terms of the conversation, the first one is that they couldn't have really been the Jets because they don't have a Sauce Gardner on their defense. They don't have a Quinnen Williams on their D-line, although Payne is close to that. And, if we're being honest, they're not anywhere near as bad as the Jets. It looks pretty bad right now with all their injuries, but unlike New York, they've got a franchise quarterback that they feel good about, who's a second contract guy here, and the Jets are still looking for their QB and in the mode where until they find one, guys like Gardner and Quinnen Williams are basically wasting their time and being paid a lot of money to be on a loser team.
Right, and so my view is, I'm assuming Jaden Daniels is out for the year. They may not assume that, but that's my assumption. And I use that as an opportunity to really kickstart this thing. And they didn't see it that way. That's how I'm viewing it. Again, we'll never know unless, again, what I would love is a report of some kind or a leak of some kind that says, nothing was really available for Washington in terms of good value. They're not just here to give players away. Some sort of reassurance that, trust us, we were trying our damnedest to get some value for some of these guys that aren't part of the long-term plans here. Which, by the way, there are dozens because that's the route they went. They went veteran Victor over everything else to try to win right now, which I got. Now you pivot, and they didn't pivot. So that's the fact that nothing was done at all makes me think it wasn't that much of a priority for them.
Look, if you wanted to trade Daron Payne for a 5 or a 6, I'm sure you could have done that. Yeah. They don't want to do that. And in the case of guys like him and Laramie Tunsil, who if you do nothing will be on the roster next year, you shouldn't do that. They're not as bad as their record. They're going to have a much easier, probably last place-ish type schedule next year. And all the things that worked against them going into this season will work for them again next year. So I am pro keeping Payne. I am absolutely pro keeping Tunsil because had you have flipped him after giving up what they did this offseason, that deal, like Lattimore, ends up being a disaster.
Would be a rotten egg, yeah.
There's no reason to move one that's worked and been good into the loss pile by yourself today just by making a trade. So that makes sense. But yeah, I'm a little surprised that like Von Miller's not in Buffalo with the Bills or in Cincinnati with the Bengals or with the Chargers or something. That would be the type of move that would have made some sense. I do think they tried, and I just don't think they had the right types of players and could get anything for the players that were actually worth moving. That's my guess. Let's go to Saman in Richmond. Why don't you think they made a trade at the deadline that passed a half hour ago?
So we're so accustomed to seeing notifications pop up, transactions coming across ticker symbols to get us closure on feeling that some kind of deal was made. But I have all faith in AP based on like what we've seen in the past and some, during draft day, what the action they took last year. I'm sure he picked up the phone, tried to make some phone calls, see what was available, and I don't see we have anything much to offer. So, it's kind of like what you said, then we probably stay par for the course with all of the big splashes we made last year. And, he doesn't have as much of a short leash being a new GM, so we're probably going to ride it out.
Thank you, buddy. Yeah, I mean, here's my working theory, that they are so all in on this, we're gonna value culture above all else, that we can't even sacrifice that during this lost season. Because if you start selling players off for future picks for guys that won't be here, that some of the young guys that you're trying to raise in this good environment might suffer because of that. And I really do believe that's kind of their true north, is this thing that they're trying to build and show everybody this is who we are all the time. And I think sometimes that rhetoric gets in the way of like cutthroat GMing, which would be much easier for me coming in as a consultant type guy on the outside.
It's possible, but you hear that stuff from Dan Quinn, and that's all DQ stuff more than Peters stuff in terms of what we see it. Now, maybe they are on the same page on a lot of things. But again, I think this is where you've got a separation of church and state a little bit, where that's the Dan Quinn way. Spin the hat backwards. Let's give you the slogans. Let's go get them, win one for the skipper, and we're all moving in the same direction, culture. I think Adam Peters is going to make the tough decisions when he has to. That last caller makes an interesting point, too. I would say he is an aggressive executive based on what we've seen. The Lattimore deal last year hasn't worked. Super aggressive.
It's aggressive. Tunsil.
The Laramie Tunsil deal this offseason was a huge splash. That's a big swing. I mean, they have absolutely done some moving and shaking here from the front office perspective that we wouldn't have anticipated. And they don't stand pat a whole lot in the draft. They've moved picks. They've moved around the board. They're making calls and dealing with Howie Roseman and the Eagles to navigate the second round a couple years ago. It's not like he hasn't liked working the phones. Let's go to Mike in Gaithersburg. What's up, Mike?
Hey, first of all, I just want to say I'm a Colts fan, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the move that we made today.
That must be nice.
Yeah, you gave up a lot, by the way.
Winning a bunch of games and getting a marquee corner must be fun.
2 1s and A.D. Mitchell, but you get one of the better corners in the league if you can get him back to his form in his first 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that this kind of compares a little bit to the Champ Bailey-Clinton Portis trade. You're getting an all-pro corner, and, I mean, we gave up a guy who fumbled out the back of the end zone and caused us to lose 1 game.
It's funny that's his entire legacy. That's the kind of career he's had, basically, as an early pick. But, yeah, everyone today is like, they traded the guy that fumbled out of the end zone. Not that he's the first player to do it. But that's way less significant than the 2 first-round picks are a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. But as far as the Commanders, I mean, I think it's just really an issue with there's not a lot of young talent on the team because, the Commanders have gotten rid of everybody who Rivera had drafted for the most part. So, I mean, you still have to build and field a team, and nobody's going to take a bite on a Bobby Wagner who has to cover wheel routes by himself or Frankie Louvu, who is suspended right now. I just don't think that there's a huge upside to moving any of these people. So I think that's why nobody would really bite, and the Commanders couldn't find a partner.
I wonder if this is another area where they were decimated by injury. I don't know that like Lattimore would have had value, but you just think about all the guys that are hurt, whether it's Eckler or Dietrich Wise, Lattimore, Terry McLaurin. Would there have been a different set of options for them if they had a healthy deck of cards here? That's very possible. If Debo hasn't been missing practices for a few weeks with a heel, would you be able possibly to have moved one of those players? I don't know. Brian, Springfield, you're on Grant and Danny. Trade deadline passed less than 40 minutes ago. Washington stood pat, didn't make any moves. What do you think?
Hey, guys, big fan. I guess my first thought is I kind of agree with Grant here that there's really not a lot of quality players that you want to move or people would be interested in. 2, traditionally, it's the top-end teams or the teams that are going for, a deep playoff run, making a trade to get somebody to make that more possible. And then the teams that are really bad record are looking to move to get draft picks to rebuild in the future. If you're in the middle, or your record is 4-4, you're not overly motivated to move or overly motivated to get rid of someone. So you're kind of just stuck in the middle. That's my thought.
Well, and we saw that a million times over with the dumb Wizards and the Atlanta Hawks for so many years, like just fighting for that 7 seed and just sort of, the hamster wheel to nowhere. I guess the point that I've been trying to make, that maybe folks don't agree, when you've just lost by a combined 60-some points over 3 weeks that nobody has done in half a decade, that your organization hasn't done in 20-some years, you're not part of the middle of the pack anymore. You're down at the bottom. You're the dregs. Whether you want to be or not, you are. And your quarterback, the whole reason for all of these exercises, aka like if he was going to play again in a couple of weeks, I'd go, yeah, I need to keep everyone around him to make sure that he's got people to throw to and his development is paramount. There's no developing. There's only rehabbing. So to me, it's fire sale time, and it didn't seem to be that way for them.